Hey everyone, it's Code Crafting, and thank you for tuning in to the next video of Road to Full Stack Developer. Now, in the last video, we spent about 20 minutes covering Git and version control, giving you some resources, explaining the difference between those resources, and ultimately today we are going to carry on that video with a second part of Git and version control by actually creating some repositories in multiple environments. So that being said, I've got my terminal open and I'm ready to use Git. Now I've already installed Git itself to my machine. I'm not going to do a ton of authentication stuff. You might want to create your own GitHub account. I'm going to create a repository with GitHub. I'm going to create another repository on Bitbucket, and then I'm going to create a project on GitLab. Then I'm going to go back to GitHub and I'm going to kind of talk about the flow of how you might use source control and really Git at the end of the day to actually work with other teammates on a project. So right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a directory, and in this directory I'm just going to call it demo repo, and repo for short for repository. I'm actually going to cd into this demo repo. And in here, I'm going to actually create a file. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to call it index.html, just a standard HTML file. And then I am going to actually use the command to git initialize this project, and that is git init. So now we have an initialized empty Git repository, and if we actually open this up in an editor, and I'm going to use VSC, Visual Studio Code, particularly for this, you can see now we have a project that has nothing but a index.html file, and the Git is actually right now, you can't actually see it, it's hidden, but you can see that over here VSC is allowing me to do some source control, and I can go ahead and create a commit message and I can actually push this. But this isn't actually set up to a repository yet of where I'd want to push this code to actually be hosted and saved in GitHub, etc. It's just the actual Git itself that has initialized this repository to start keeping track of various changes. So real quickly, for the sake of just having this, I'm going to use this actual snippet I have for HTML, and I'm just going to call it again demo repo. And I'm not going to have these links in here for now. I don't need CSS. There isn't a JavaScript file, so I'm going to delete that. And in here, I'm just going to have a header that just says demo repo. So now we have an actual HTML file, and this could be a directory that has a lot of other things. Now I actually have an extension on here that is also going to keep track of history, so I'm going to want a file called .gitignore, and this ignore file is what's going to allow me to specify things that I don't want to be tracked in here, and specifically, as you can see, this extension I have keeps a local copy of history of my repository. So I'm going to go ahead and say in this git ignore, I would like to just ignore this .history actual directory that's getting stored within my directory. And once I save that, you can see that this will actually go from 6 with all of that history changes to the only 2 files that I'm actually adding. Now in standard Git, the process for this would be that if we were check this files, we'd see we have our Git our actual file. We also have a git ignore file, and we can actually use Git to check the status of what we have. And you can see when we use the command git status, we can see that there are 2 files that we have not added. Now I am going to do this within VSC. I am linking the git command, so you can do this entirely in the terminal. And what you would do is you would git add the files you'd like to do, that you'd like to add to your current branch. We are on a master branch right now, which is like our default standard branch for creating a new project. And we are going to add files to it and push it to where we would like to set up our actual code. Now that being said, we've got a file and we can start making commits, but we don't actually have this set to be pushed to any repository. So I'm now going to have my browser open here, and in my browser, I'm going to be on GitHub, So the first thing we're going to do is add an existing local project, and then we're going to test cloning down a different project. So I have a bunch of repositories that I've created and other repositories I've forked from other people who've created repositories. But for the cloning, we'll use the Gin and Go application. And for now, we're going to create a new repository. And in this process, we want to ensure that we name it the same file that we have locally. Now, you could create this repository and then clone it down instead of creating a local repository or local project first. So in this case, we're actually going to set this to be equal. So we want to make sure that the file, the name of the directory, which is called demo repo, matches with everything that we want to import, actually push to GitHub to our new repository inside of it. So it is going to be called demo repo, and I don't have any repositories named that. And so I can say a demo repo. And in this case, we can choose whether we want it to be public or private. You do not have to pay for private repositories anymore for up to, I believe, 3 collaborators. So if you want to test this and just do it privately, you can. We can also initialize this with the markdown file, a readme.md file, that we can specify what's going on in this repository. And then we can also add a git ignore and add a license. In this case, I'm just going to leave the README there. I am not going to have a git ignore because I'll be adding that. And as for license, I'm not going to add anything there as well. And actually, now that I think about it, I won't even add a README because I'd like to just go ahead and force changes. So I create this repository, and you can see now we have this repository. Now, if I were to just grab this via copy this and clone it, then I could actually just instantly install this repository with my GitHub access and SSH, as they call it. That would allow me to go ahead and make changes directly to this branch because I'm the original contributor. But we're not going to do a cloning process now. We're actually going to set our local repository to match this repository and add and commit our changes, and then we're going to push it to the repository so we can see an update with the code that we've added. Now, there is a URL that comes from GitHub Help, and GitHub Help is great. It'll give you everything you need to know. There are tons of ways to just check FAQ, and they aren't just, telling you what to do. They show it with the commands, and so you can see here's how you initialize, here's how you would add the changes in your local repository, here's how you could commit in the terminal, and then of course here is how we will add a origin remote URL. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this, and now that we have a URL, we're going to git remote add origin, and then we're going to grab this URL, which we can press this to copy. We'll make sure we do a space, and we're going to add remote add this particular repository. So now this code, when we commit it, we should be able to update our actual main branch, which is this demo repository. So instead of doing the actual git commands, I tend to like to use a VSC or my editor's built-in Git source control integration. Reason being is I can actually have files that are staged, and it's a little bit easier to just click like what files I want to add or actually staged for getting committed. And I can also click and see what the differences are if it's an updated file. If it's a file being added or deleted or modified, then you can see the differences if it's been modified. If you add a file or delete a file, then you can't really see the differences because really you're just deleting the entire file. But you can click on differences, and that's something that's really enjoyable. The other thing is you can do a number of things here. You can do all of the commands that would under the hood be done via actually the terminal. It just depends on how you like it. I like being able to type my commit message in here and then press the command enter to actually just commit it right away. And then in terminal is where I like to push my code to the actual branch. So in this case, we've got 2 files that we've added here, and we're going to go ahead, and now that we've set our origin to that URL, we should be able to make a commit. Now, typically your commit message, if you're working in a real environment, you might have a system where you get issue numbers, and maybe there's a particular branch that you are branching off of to create a feature. In this case, we don't have any issue numbers, but normally what it would look like is maybe something like dev-1 for the actual issue number of whatever feature or bug that this whole branch or what we're doing is working on, and we'll cover that in a second. And then maybe a colon, and then a quick synopsis of what we've done. Typically, this is adding, updating, deleting. If it's a work in progress, but you're trying to commit frequently, just because it's wise to commit frequently every time you do something, then you might use something like, WIP at the end of what your statement is to state work in progress. The commit does not necessarily have to have your initials, but when we get to creating a branch, that will be the case. You will want to specify your branch with your initials in the beginning, the issue or feature or whatever request number that is tied to this particular work, and then a short description in the branch name. But right now we're just directly pushing to the master branch because in this new repository we only have one branch and it's master. And we're going to say add index.html and .gitignore file. And this is a pretty basic one. You can imagine that when you do some more complicated work, you have to condense this down into a small commit message that can be easily tracked, so that way later when you're pushing code for a release, it can be easily seen what was done in each one and give whoever's looking at the commit history, which is the reason for version control, is our tracking. Git is tracking the history of our repository, our code base. So now I'm going to use Command Enter, and you can see we've committed. And then I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to say git push. And since I'm on master, I can say git push, and that's it. But I'm just going to say origin master. And this should actually go ahead and push our code. Now, if for some reason you're creating a new repository and it doesn't let you push right away because you created the initial repository on GitHub with, let's say a README file, and you just want to overwrite it because you're just trying to get this connected, you can do git push origin master space dash force and just force override. But I highly recommend that you set it up the correct way, so that way you don't do this, because you really only want to force in a situation that it truly deems it, right? And that everything that was there is already existing and pushed before. And so that's kind of one thing to think about. So now we've pushed our code and you can see it's successfully pushed. And so we can go back to our actual repository. And if we reload this, we should see now we have our new all of the code that we have on our local machine initialized in GitHub. And so somebody now can go and clone this project if it's public. In this case, it's private. And we can see that we have one commit, and this is the commit message. And if we wanted to revert back to this commit, this state in our repository, we could, using this long commit number, and we could actually go back to this version of our code and its history. Now, I'm going to also show how to create a new branch. Most people do not select here and look for a branch that way unless you're looking to see maybe at a feature and see some of the commits that have been happening on another branch. Now, in the real world, and I'm going to actually do this in VSC temporarily by actually adding a terminal in here locally. And so now I have my terminal in here, and hopefully you can see this without any issues. Now, to create a new branch, and the reason for having a new branch, we would want to use git checkout-b. And this is us checking out of the master branch and using the -b to specify we're creating a branch and that we are going to name the branch after. Now, to understand this too, this is going to replicate what master is and just create a new branch. And this is where we are branching off of our master branch. Now, the reason we'd want to branch off of our master branch is we do not want to be making commits and pushes to our highest level, or you could say lowest level branch that is potentially our production branch. This could be the branch that we actually deliver what we deliver to the client, right? Or into our production environment, you might call it in simple terms. So really, we would want to have maybe an additional branch that everybody branches from that is like a development branch. And maybe we'd even want to create a test branch off of that development branch that QAers can go and check it out into and test the feature live by running an application. So in this case, we are going to create a developer branch. And now that we have a developer branch, we don't really need to work on this developer branch because our new feature is we are going to add something to the developer branch, but I am an individual developer. If we all worked on the developer branch, then we would have a ton of conflicts and constantly somebody else who's working on this branch might have to pull it down. So we do want to work independently for our specific feature or specific issue. Now I'm going to actually go ahead and go back to our repository here, and I'm going to create a new issue in which we want to add JavaScript. And so this is a feature request, so we might want to give it a label. And you can see there's some defaults here, but we're going to say just a good first issue. And so we're giving it a label. We don't have any projects or milestones. Maybe we want to assign ourselves to this or assign another developer who's a collaborator and been invited to the repository. But we're going to say add some basic JavaScript to our project. So in a way, this is actually kind of a feature request. And maybe I want to, give it an enhancement to specify this is a first issue, but this is also something that will be an enhancement to our project, not a bug, etc. So I'm going to submit this new issue. And so now you can see we have an issue. And this means that now we have not just across one branch, but across all branches, we have an issue that can be referenced. So that means that since I'm assigned to this issue, and this issue could be in Jira as well, not in GitHub. It could be wherever your ticketing system of how you distribute work and various bugs and UI bugs or server-side services, etc., to individual developers that you work with or yourself. So we're going to go ahead and reference another checkout-b because we're going to create a branch off of developer. Ideally, off of developer will be where we would merge maybe a bunch of our different branches from different developers handling different issues together at some point, handle all of the conflicts, and then once that is good, we might actually make a branch off of that we would actually use as our specific version of maybe a release branch, and that branch might be after the testing branch. So there's a little bit of flow here that could change, and it depends on where you work. Ideally, in this situation, it'll be very laid out for you. They'll kind of say, yeah, these are the branches we have for staging. This is the branch we have for testing, etc. Every place has a little bit different, calls it something maybe a little bit different, and that's something that you want to know when you come onto the job. So we are going to call this branch SC-1. So my first name and last name initials, the issue number that we're tackling. This could be 4,702. It wouldn't, you would only want it to reference. So that way, when people see this branch, if they check out branches, they can go, oh, that's Frank's branch, and he's working on this number issue, and then a synopsis. So we'll say, add JS. Right? And so now this branch is not only my individual branch, it's checked out, meaning it is kind of a clone branching from the developer branch. So we have the main branch, which branches off to the developer branch, and then off of that developer branch branches my feature branch. So now you can see how things are starting to get a little bit complicated, and this is really just one person working in an environment of many. So I'm going to go ahead and create that branch, and then I'm going to come into here, and you know what? This is where I'm going to add my JavaScript file. So I'm going to have an index.js file. And in my JavaScript, I'm not going to do anything. Maybe I'll just console log my JS file, which really isn't the greatest program for something like this. You'd probably be doing something a little bit more complicated, maybe even coming into a new project where there's already existing work and your first issue is fixing a bug. People tend to like to have new developers coming in, work on potentially some bugs. That way they can get comfortable reading the code base in the repository, whether it's private for an organization or not. So that being said, we've created a JavaScript file, and so there's a quick little secret to potentially what is used in sometimes, and we can say this is how we reference commands for closing issues. And so I'm going to pull this up, and these are the keywords that you can use to actually close that issue in your actual commit. So you can say closes, fixed, fixes, fixed. So basically, it's really just close, fix, and resolve, and then some additional aspects of that. But we want to specify the number of what we're closing for GitHub. So that being said, we can say that we are going to put this onto staging because we're adding a new file. And then here we can reference the name. So we can say dev-1, or in this case, dev-1 because the main branch is developer. And we can say add JS, and we can say closes number 1. And so we're going to go ahead and commit this, and then we're going to push it, and we could do this in terminal as well. In this case, we aren't actually pushing master branch. We're pushing updates to our branch. And there it is. All right, so now we actually have essentially pushed a branch that we now have that has the updates. So if we go back to our actual repository and we click on this, you can see that there's a showing of a branch that was pushed and that there isn't actually a JavaScript file in our repository. And that's because we have another branch. And we also, if we made one mistake here, we actually might want to check out back to develop and actually push this as well. Or whatever our branch that our JavaScript branch is our issue feature branch is actually coming off of. So here you can see you get pretty comfortable moving out and checking out to a branch that already exists. It's just git checkout and then the name. And then if you have autocomplete, you can tab and find the right one. So now if we look at this, we should be able to see that there are now 3 branches: developer, which would maybe be called dev or development or, staging, whatever you would like to call it. And you can see we have this branch. Now, what we want to do is we don't actually want to directly update our master branch yet, because this master branch is what's showing to maybe the client or used in production. So we actually want to go over here and we want to take a look. Okay, well, we have a branch and we want to compare and create a pull request. Now the weird name for pull request is kind of hard for new developers. Are like pulling request. Well, that's because you can actually make requests to other people's code in their repositories without being a contributor and putting in like some changes to the file, and that can be opened up as a pull request that person who manages or people who manage that repository can look at and determine if this code should be added to essentially the master branch. Now they probably would merge it not into master as well. And so in this case, we don't want to actually merge into the base of master. We actually just want to update our developer branch with a comparison to our JavaScript branch, which is a feature branch that we're going to put in because we want it to be reviewed. So in here, we're going to say, again, we can say closes number 1, and you can see it gives a little drop down because it's recognizing that issue. And we can specify, added JavaScript to our repository. Okay, and so this will probably be a little bit different. You might have some templates that are pre-built by an admin of the repository, so that there's structure to opening a pull request or a bug or whatever you end up bug fix, whatever it ends up being, and you can give different assignment there to those organizers or to your boss, etc. So we create this pull request, and now you can see that there's actually no conflicts on this. And really, what you would like to do is if you're in your actual branch and you've made a bunch of changes and maybe you've been working for a while, you might want to real quickly git check out to the branch that you're going to merge in before you put this PR in and say, git pull origin developer to get all the changes of maybe other developers that have pushed changes that have been PR'd and merged into the developer branch. And then you would want to go back to your branch and maybe git merge everything that is developer branch into this branch. In this case, we don't have anything that has been updated on the from other developers, and so we don't have any conflicts to deal with. But you might get some changes that might create some conflicts with your changes, and this is where you would kind of handle some conflicts before actually making a commit to merging all those changes from maybe the branch that your branch came out of that is going back into. So now we have a PR here, and this can be addressed by anyone. You can see what it is, and people can actually go ahead and look at the file changes. Looks like we added a JS file and just did some console log, and then they can, actually review the changes, and they can comment on it. They can approve it or send request. You can't actually review your own PRs. You can respond to comments, and people can actually start by reviewing like a larger reviewing everything and then adding individual comments like this to specifically start adding a single comment or start a review of multiple files if you had multiple files. Ideally, PRs would be as concise and clean and as small as possible to make them very readable and reviewable by other developers, so that way that you can get them right on board with an approval, or easily see that this is maybe not a big deal. Let's get this approved and get this into development as quickly as possible for the next feature release. Usually you'll have a code freeze, a period of time where you stop reviewing code or stop putting in code to a branch, and you can still commit it maybe into your working development branch, but not a branch that's actually going to get merged into master and be in production. So that's how you can kind of set things in different development life cycles during what we would call like a sprint, a development sprint, in which we're working on features and everybody's trying to accomplish what was set for that sprint during a sprint planning meeting. And this is the features that we'd like to add for the client or for the general product we'd like to improve. So that being said, here it is, and now we're looking at this PR, and we can see that we have an open PR. We can come in here, and we can say, you know what, this is good, there's no conflicts. You can set up continuous integration, which will run on the PR and make sure that there aren't any linting errors, make sure that it adheres to, specifics, whatever you'd want it to adhere to. It can run test if we actually added tests for our unit test, or even continue, full end-to-end testing like Cypress or something. So this is kind of where we can have integration set up, which is a different conversation that is a part of the build of development, and making sure that we don't get stuff and bugs into our main branch. And this will prevent things from being able to be merged if there are conflicts or if there are things that we want to enforce to prevent problems. So we're going to go ahead and merge this pull request. We're going to confirm merge. And so now we have merged this branch into the development branch. And we don't even need this branch anymore, right? Because now we've merged it and we can see that. So we'll go ahead and delete the branch. And this branch deletion is not deleting it from our local machine. It's deleting it from the repository. And so you can see now that even though this number's gone, if we go back to our issues, it is still going to exist because it has not been merged into the master branch. So the problem is not going to be fixed or resolved or created until it's merged all the way in production. So that being said, our pull request has been merged. We do have a change on developer. And so we're actually going to create another PR, and we're going to say that this is where we close, number one, and maybe we reference our other branch of what was going on there, and we specify like some specs of what is changing. And in this case, we would probably be merging, there'd be an additional branch, and we'd be merging like a number of different feature branches and saying, hey, these are all the changes that we would like to get to production. Right now we're going to merge directly to production. You can see those changes here. And this is comparing development to master. We're good to go. We can see that all the files that were changed in this branch are still minimal. Maybe there would be other changes to the other files from other developers. And we are going to merge this to the developer branch. And now we can go ahead and not delete our developer branch, because this is maybe the branch that we work off, but you can see it's merged. And if we reload, you'll actually see that issue has now been closed because we referenced it with the keyword to actually close this issue when that was merged into our production branch. So that's pretty much how we create a repository on GitHub using Git version control, and how we ultimately can kind of think about and reason how we would work with other developers. And this is specifically with GitHub. So there is also Bitbucket. And here you can see I'm creating a Bitbucket account. I have one that I use for work, because we use Bitbucket at work. And we can go ahead and create a repository very similar here, and call it demo repo. We'll have it be private. We aren't going to use Mercurial for version control. We're going to use Git. And we can go ahead and create a repository. And you can see it's a similar situation in which we are on a master branch. We've got maybe a README that came in with an initial commit. And then there's specifically, some information on how to clone or create a file. And it's a little bit similar. You can see here's clone, and so you could actually get the URL and clone it down via HTTP or SSH. In SSHs, you are going to have to set up with Git and with whatever you're using. You are going to have to ensure that you have connection that verifies who you are as able to push changes to any branch or any account, really. So you're going to have to globally set configuration of that, and when you do this whole process, if you haven't already. I didn't go through all of that just because that's something that you should learn when you're setting it up, and there are documents for whatever you're using to host your code. But you can see we have commits here, branches, pull requests as well. There is also boards, and this can work really well in line with a tool like Jira for project management. But Bitbucket is essentially, like we talked in the last video, similar to GitHub, a different product though, a little bit different flow and different way to look at things. And ultimately, it's kind of, in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of Bitbucket. I think that things can be really easily done in GitHub. And so that being said, that would be how you'd create a repository in Bitbucket. It's very simple, similar process, and then you would follow the same kind of process for setting it to this URL, or maybe just at this point, just cloning it down using this whole command. You can even see they prefix it with the git clone in here. And so I'm going to real quickly show you how to clone down a project. So we're going to go ahead and go to not my repository. Actually, you know what? We'll go to my repositories, and we'll go hit a Golang application. And to clone a project down when you first come on to a new workforce and they give you access to all those repos you're going to be working on, then you're going to clone them down to your local machine. So this is where you would, get your command, and then wherever you'd like to actually store that, which in this case, we wouldn't want to store it in this app. So we'll cd outside. We'll see where we are at. We're still in this. We're in demos. Maybe we want this in coding. And then we can actually git clone this particular repository down. And so now you can see that the repository gin and go is in here. And we can cd into gin and go. And so there are our files that actually have been cloned down locally. Now we still are on basically the master branch if we were to actually open this in our editor or in general. So we'd kind of create the same process. Now this is a project that I own. If you were to actually use something like, let's say Facebook, I think it's under straight up React, you can see that you would actually want to fork this, which would create a copy of this whole code base under your name, make the changes that you'd want to under your name, and then create a pull request like these 142 that would actually be comparing their master branch with your individual branch. And you can see that that's what's happening in this case, in which he is opening a pull request to add a test for calling dispatch from use effect cleanup. And you can see that, Facebook's issues are not small. They've had almost 6,600 closed issues. They've got 400 issues that exist right now, whether they're bugs or they need investigation or question, etc. And there's 142 PRs to look at that could potentially increase or better the product that is being delivered, in this case, a front-end framework for JavaScript, React. So that is kind of a little bit of the flow there. Hopefully this answers a lot of questions. This video is a lot longer, but we did create a Bitbucket account as well. That is how you'd clone it down. Maybe you'd get access to an organization. I'm no longer part of the organization that I would normally use for work, and that's why these commits have dropped down, because the company that I worked at before switched to Bitbucket. And then after that, where I went to, because I'd been there for some time, I moved to a new developer role at a new company, and they use Bitbucket from the start. So essentially all those commits have dropped, and I don't have any org here that is work related. But if I look at this little toy project that is, trying to help organize some stuff as an interim CTO for a little startup here in Sacramento that's been, getting some traction. you can see that this is an organization from GitHub, and they can actually control, the people that are in part of it. You can set up teams. You can actually create projects that have, different agendas, and this is kind of similar to maybe Jira. And so you can start to create some diversity here. And if we actually go back and look at Facebook's specific repository, you can click on their org, and you can see this is, essentially a bunch of repositories that are under the organization. There are people that are used in it. It has some synopsis of top languages, and you can see that they don't use this for project management, but they do use this to give access directly to various people for contributing to Facebook. Now, the last thing is GitLab, and this would be similar to Bitbucket or to GitHub, although they were free for a while in ways that GitHub was not. And also they have some different features apparently that are very beneficial for DevOps. But you'd have a similar situation here where you would create a project, which is essentially very similar to creating a repository, and you would have the same thing. I have my demo repo, and this is essentially what it's going to be, the URL. And we might say we want this to be private or internal or public. I think it's cool that they have an interesting difference between what is private and what is can only be accessed by any logged in user, internal. But let's just give this a private repository. We'll create the project. And you can imagine now we have a very similar view with commits, branches, tags. We can clone it here. And it's essentially another repository that shows these different files. They have some quick accessible ability to add, like a Kubernetes cluster, a changelog, README. And then they have also, some activity, and they have the same similar kind of thing of issues where you could have a list and boards and milestones, merge requests, which would be kind of the same thing as pull request in some sense. They also have continuous integration and continuous deployment. And that's the whole process of integrating the existing branch into production and pushing that in. Deployment is the pushing of that code, whether it's, to prod, etc. They have additional stuff in here and some snippets and settings, but basically it would be a very similar process to clone this down, this repository created, and gain access to it and make changes and create branches and have that flow. Now, this is where a tool like GitKraken might come in. I am actually going to open up SourceTree specifically, and I'm going to open up real quickly a portfolio. That's not what I want. Oh, I guess that these got moved. Yeah, this is really old. I don't even use that. So if I wanted to, I could create a new repository that is local. And I would like to delete that as well. That is old. So in here, we could actually scan a directory and find one. And that's what we're going to do right now. We'll go into our demos file and we'll find that demo repo and we'll add it to SourceTree. And this is like a next high up level where we can actually open this. And this would be where we could actually view this, or GitKraken, or even just GitHub standard. We can actually view the branches and see the changes that were made, that were of various files, who they were made by, the commit number, the time. And this branch can get really this whole UI view here can get really complex as you have a ton of different developers working on a ton of different branches. And so you have this little GUI, and there are a ton of different little features that are very powerful for, handling different things that are more of like the professional side of this whole thing for your different branches. And you can even do stuff like fetch or commit or pull in here if you wanted to versus in your environment. So that's kind of where those tools we talked about last time start to come into play, is they are not a replacement fully for like GitHub. They are an integration tool that works with that and with Git and version control to make it easier for you to manage or reason about or quickly create branches or quickly merge branches or see the changes, etc. So that's pretty much it for this video. There is a lot of content here. We created a repository with GitHub, went through kind of the whole flow there. We went through actually cloning items and how you would handle getting code onto your local machine, as well as how you would make updates, make changes, and create branches and push those commits that you've made of updates and kind of some small, simple stylistic preferences there. And we also did the same thing quickly, but not actually setting up the same repository and going through the whole process again with Bitbucket as well as with GitLab. So this is kind of an introduction to the world of Git when it comes to a professional environment. You're going to be working with these tools depending on what company you work at and the stack that they use. And so if you're curious about that, you should check out Stackshare.io. They are not a sponsor of this. I'm just putting this out there. They're an incredible site that make it really easy to quickly browse stacks, and you might be able to gauge what tools that company uses. And so maybe, for example, you're interested in working at Airbnb. There are obviously smaller companies here, and you can kind of see their entire stack, and you might be able to find out where they actually hosting code. And in this case, you can see they're using GitHub. Maybe that's the only thing they use. I don't see Bitbucket in here. I don't even see anything really Atlassian focused at all. And so you can see that, yeah, you're probably not going to have to deal with Bitbucket at a place like this, which is great versus maybe Uber, they might not use GitHub. They may use something else to host code. You can see their project management tool is Asana, and they're using Zendesk for their help desk. As far as where they're actually hosting their code, they don't actually state anything here that I can see off the top of my head as far as what they're using to actually host their code. So it may not actually show exactly everything, but you can kind of get a feel for exploring different tools, and you can actually compare your tools if you'd like. And you can see right here is a common comparison: GitHub versus Bitbucket versus GitLab. And if you want to kind of see, what is going on statistic-wise, you could compare which one you would like to work with, how many people are using it, what's going on here, just some different opinions, some synopsis about what it is, and then maybe some different things that people have created to, upvote on or submit and upvote different questions, and even some little bit of view on the pricing here, a quick comparison, and then those companies that are using what. So this is kind of pretty cool. I really, really like Stackshare. I use Stackshare to look up various things and read different articles on what, and even reviews on kind of what people have to say. And I think that that's something really cool and powerful, and this is completely free. So that being said, I'm pretty sure we have done everything that we needed to do today. This is exactly what you will be doing in a real world environment. You will be dealing with this kind of technology and dealing with version control every day. You're going to have some weird issues. You'll create problems for yourself, and maybe that's going to be fleshed out by you learning how to actually use Git. And so that's why I bring it back to learning Git commands versus just learning how to integrate with or use GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. So thank you so much for watching. This video was really long. If you watched one part or the other, or you were looking for just one piece, I didn't want to separate it out into this is Bitbucket, this is GitHub, this is GitLab, simply because with Bitbucket and GitLab, we didn't actually go through the process fully to fruition, just because it was a little bit, redundant. So hopefully this has been helpful for you to kind of see the process, learn Git, learn version control, learn how to create a branch, learn how to check out between branches, learn how to put a pull request in, fork a repository like Facebook's React or some repository that's open source that you're interested in. Find a change that you can, make commits on your own branch, push that and make a PR and put a PR in. Try to contribute to open source. This open source community is huge. People love to help each other, and it's a great way to actually kind of see what people do for open source. Go through your favorite repositories, see the issues, see who they're assigned to, and see the pull requests that are being put in to actually fix or update that product to make it better. And this is a community-driven thing. Everybody in the community that is working as developers should know what these different products are and why they are used in development. And I wanted to break that down for you as simply as possible. Hopefully it was a good pace and not too long. I know these things can go on and people can do demos of this, and it's a lot to gauge. So don't be overwhelmed, especially if you just started using the terminal and now you haven't even really learned a programming language in this track yet. We haven't started programming language. The next thing we're actually going to start with is not index, but it is HTML. We're going to start talking about HTML. We're going to talk about elements, attributes, semantic HTML. We're going to talk about accessibility in HTML, and that's going to be in the next video. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. Thank you for your time. Hopefully I helped you out. That's why I enjoy doing this every week. We are going to start getting deeper and deeper into content that I really want to get into. I am already, spending time doing some of that content on my list. That is the first video of my channel outside of actually recording it. So I'm kind of still on track with that, even though that content isn't recorded yet. And we will get to that stuff. I'm really looking forward to it. So please subscribe, put a comment below if you have any questions or feedback for me. I really care about making this a better channel and this to be a community channel. I am going to create a Discord at some point where I think it will be cool for developers and designers and people who are interested in becoming developers or in boot camps or in, studying CS at a four-year university or getting their master's in, computer science, whatever it is, can come together and they can share passion for various languages, learning knowledge, and that be moderated. So thank you so much again. I will put everything down below. You can also follow my Instagram, Code Crafting, if you want to kind of see posts that I put out. I also post, a picture whenever I put a new video out that will take you to my bio, and you can look at the bio and see the link to my channel. I don't have 100 subscribers yet, so please subscribe, because once we do that and reach that small little milestone, then I can start to actually put out a URL, like go to youtube.com/this. So that is only going to happen when I have 100 subscribers. I know I'm a niche little small channel and that this isn't about getting a bunch of subscribers. I would like to, however, hit 100 subscribers somehow so that I could get that custom URL and make it a little bit easier for people to, check out this content and hopefully help more and more people who are just diving into this now. It is never too late to start learning to code. It is never too late to start learning these tools. It is never too difficult. You can get help from people in Slack communities. There is so much out there for resources now. What I'm trying to do is just give you the introduction you need so that you can start investigating and getting comfortable with this stuff yourself. That is a lot of stuff. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.